So Judgment Day has happened and the war against machines has begun, and our only savior is Christian Bale. This is my review of Terminator Salvation. In the year 2018, Skynet has destroyed most of humanity, and the survivors now fight a desperate battle against the machines. John Connor is the man fated to lead the resistance to victory, but new discoveries of Skynet's plans begin to make him believe that this is not the future he was warned about. Meanwhile, former death row convict Marcus Wright awakes amidst the ruins of a recent battle, with no memory of how he got there, let alone how the world came to be this way. When he travels to a desolate Los Angeles, he joins with a young Kyle Reese and Star in a journey to locate the resistance, but becomes separated when the young fighters are abducted by Skynet. A new hope seems to come to the resistance when they discover a way to jam Skynet's signal and disable their drones, which prompts the leaders to coordinate a full-scale attack on Skynet. However, when Marcus eventually reaches the resistance base alongside Soldier Blair Williams, a shocking revelation blindsides everyone, including John Connor. Knowing the frightening realities at hand, Connor and Marcus both embark on an odyssey that takes them into the heart of Skynet's operations, where they must come face to face with their destinies and attempt to strike the first major blow against the enemy intent on exterminating all mankind. So after the release of Terminator 3, there was regular development over the next several years on a fourth film in the franchise, but as would become commonplace for this franchise, the rights for it ended up falling out of the hands of the current producers of the time, Mario Kassar and Andrew Vajna, who had a very large falling out, and in 2007 the rights were purchased by the Houseline Company, and Terminator Salvation was being developed and produced concurrently with the television series Terminator the Sarah Connor Chronicles, which ran for 2 seasons, until it got unceremoniously cancelled by Fox on a absolutely agonizing cliffhanger. And the writing and development of Salvation could probably allow you to actually pinpoint where a lot of the fundamental flaws of this film came from, because it's originally written by one set of screenwriters, then rewritten by yet another screenwriter, then 3 weeks before filming began, rewritten by yet another screenwriter, and then once they actually started production on the film, brought screenwriter Jonathan Nolan on set to do even further rewrites. And usually when you see a film going through that type of process, it's usually the studio and or filmmakers realizing there's a lot of holes in the script, we can't quite lock it down, it's not quite working, and we're trying to fix it on the fly, and usually that ends up with a big fat mess of a script that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and that's definitely a major thing I'm going to get into about this film. It's very interesting to wonder how someone like McG, of all people, ended up being attached to direct this film, considering everything else in his filmography before and after this really doesn't show that he'd be the guy to take on a Terminator film, previously doing the Charlie's Angels films, and since then just doing a lot of sort of action fluff piece type of things that are generally not well received films. But McG was kind of worried about flogging a dead horse with this film and wanted to kind of go into that future war setting and do something different and fresh, that you're not rehashing the same old time travel concepts and such and everything. So he just wanted to go into that and introduce a different style of storyline. And he did meet with James Cameron prior to going into production, and Cameron really didn't sort of endorse or kind of negate the film overall, but he just kind of gave McG a little advice about when he went on with Aliens, all the sort of pressures and everything that he took on doing a sequel to another person's film that was extremely well received. So McG went into this film, and this is a mixed bag of a film that I've never hated. It's one of those films I kind of like for its potential, that it has a lot of very interesting and potentially good ideas, but it's a script and a film that is completely half-baked in its ideas, because it's got good setups for everything, but it doesn't go anywhere and do anything with it or explains exactly what the heck is going on with this altered supposed future that is what John Connor in the film says. It's not the future that I was warned about. This is a completely different future, and a lot of different things are happening than what he was told would happen. So it's like, it's an interesting concept,
that is a little bit stronger than T3, because at least with this film it plays it with a very serious tone, maybe a tad bit too serious, that it is very bleak, very drab, very heavy in its tone. It doesn't have as much moments of sort of lifting up the levity of the film, just kind of opening it up, which is again a problem here, that there isn't, it has some semblance of emotion, but overall, with a lot of the things with this film, you don't get that deeper down humanity permeating through the entire storyline or the characters overall. That it really becomes a problem with the writing and a lot of the performances here, that everything just kind of sits at a certain level and doesn't dig any deeper into it to really kind of flesh it out and really make it a much more stronger picture overall, that any kind of emotion that is in the film really doesn't strike very strongly. And the storyline of this film really got shifted around and rewritten in pre-production once Christian Bale signed on to the role in the form of John Connor instead of Marcus Wright. So they wanted, well, Christian Bale's in the film, let's give him a much more substantive, meaty part of the plot and everything. So they expanded his role in the film, and the whole Marcus Wright storyline in this film, which is really where everything starts kind of unraveling and just doesn't make a whole lot of damn sense. Because you got this guy, pre-Judgment Day, who is apparently on death row and signs a contract with Cyberdyne Systems Genetics Division for something that is never really totally explained. And then you find out later in the film, which was totally spoiled in the trailers. Let's not have a shock in the film. Let's just spoil it and try to not give you any surprises. But that he becomes revealed to be a cyborg, sort of a advanced infiltration that is supposed to go on this weird mission and everything to try to lure John Connor into Skynet to be killed. It's extremely elaborate for a lot of stupid reasons. That if you could get this guy into the Resistance base, why not, once he sees John Connor, just flip out and just go ahead and kill him? It's a very overly elaborate type of scheme that has a lot of holes in this screenplay and everything, because nothing's really explained to this film. That's the main problem, that you have all these incongruities with the storyline that we are aware of, and continuity and all this type of stuff, and it seems to imply that Skynet is aware that Kyle Reese is John Connor's father through whatever means, whatnot, and by no means in this film does it ever go ahead and try to explain how the hell Skynet knows that. Because it has no possible way of knowing that. Never in the entire series has Skynet been aware of that fact. And by no means do they actually explain how they know that. But it's never explicitly stated, so it's just it ends up being this very confusing aspect of the whole storyline, that somehow they know without having a way of actually letting them know. So it's how does all this stuff function together? And even then, it's John Connor's not, at this point in time in the war, he is not the leader of the Resistance. He certainly is sort of an icon of the Resistance. A lot of people are inspired by his speeches over the CB band radio and everything, but there are other people who are leading the war, people who are in charge of the military strikes and everything. They are coordinating all the efforts, but it's just a very interesting thing that is still, it's still the same kind of plot that you've had in the previous Terminator films, where Skynet is trying to kill John Connor before he really comes to power. They just excise the whole time travel thing and just try to mix together some weird storyline that doesn't really make a whole lot of damn sense. And you could go so much deeper into this and try to figure out exactly the ins and outs of the mechanics of exactly why it doesn't work. But it's just the fact that it has all these ideas that it introduces but never explains how they come into being, how all this information becomes at Skynet's disposal, without ever actually being able to tell us how. And that's the big thing, that there are just so many plot holes in this film that just don't get resolved by the end of it. It just doesn't make any sense. It's a film that just has ideas that are interesting, they're intriguing, they just don't go anywhere, and they don't amount to anything. And it really is that whole storyline of this character of Marcus, who's mainly supposed to be the main character of the whole film, that you're supposed to follow this character on a certain amount of emotional arc or whatnot, but he casted Sam Worthington in the film, and for whatever reason, this guy was the hot guy for about a year or two or whatnot, and I don't know why, because he's not that good of an actor. He's really just one note in the whole film. He really doesn't have any sort of emotional range. He's just very kind of stoic and kind of monotone and such in what he does. There's really nothing inspiring about the characters, nothing all that interesting. There's no real sort of emotional connection to build with the character, so just like, it's a character there that could be handled much better if it was in a much more dimensional and capable actor's hands to really kind of give you a much more wider breadth of emotion with this guy, especially if it was written just a little bit better to just have his journey be a bit more interesting overall, because there's not a whole lot really to it that just kind of go along seeing this guy wander around post-Judgment Day Earth and he doesn't know what the hell's going on, and he just finds out that he's a cyborg and goes into an infiltration mission for the Resistance to bring down Skynet, and that's pretty much all there is to the whole thing. And just like, Sam Worthington might have a good look, but that's all he's got. There's nothing that he can bring to the table for this character to really make him a bit interesting or engaging or whatnot. But you also have Christian Bale here, who is honestly a really damn good freaking actor. I mean, once I saw him in American Psycho, I was hooked into this guy for almost everything that he started. I saw Reign of Fire, I saw The Machinist, I was blown away when he was announced as cast as Batman in Nolan's trilogy and everything, and Prestige, a whole bunch of stuff. He's been a great actor, he's done amazing work, but there's something wrong with this performance that it just doesn't fit. I will say first, I do believe that Bale does bring some very good qualities into his performance, such as the very battle-hardened, weary quality of John Connor that I think is very essential to the character at this point in time, and the camaraderie and bond that he's built up amongst all these soldiers to show off the loyalty and the trust and the belief they have in John Connor is very well shown off in this film, with a lot of good chemistry that Bale has with his co-stars to really kind of bring out those deeper qualities in the emotions and just subtleties that you have with that kind of bond and relationship. You see the formings of a legend in John Connor, and I think overall there is a lot of potential with the performance. However, that even Christian Bale is as good of an actor that he is, he's not able to elevate the material to anywhere, because whether it's just the limitations of the material itself, or the fact that McG was just not the right director to take this type of material and enhance it to another level to really kind of dig that out of there, and Christian Bale really kind of was questioning what makes you think that you're the right guy to take on this production. And I think Christian Bale really is not very keen on McG these days at all in retrospect. Doesn't seem like he's ever going to want to work with the guy again, because it just was not a good experience. And yeah, everyone really knows the lash out freaking tirade he had on set. That's kind of funny to listen to, but it was probably a really bad thing at the time to hear him lashing out and chewing out the damn cinematographer for fucking with the lights during the takes but whatnot. But it's not the best of productions for him, and he probably doesn't have good memories of it. And it's just weird because, I mean, he's using the same old Batman growly voice and everything that you expect the character of John Connor, the guy who's going to be the leader of the Resistance, is going to be the personality of him is going to be very inspiring. That the guy is going to be very charismatic. He's going to be just the right sort of iconic legend of sorts, that you'd probably have a little bit more of the warmth that you had with Sarah Connor with all the shattered psyche baggage and everything, that you have someone that just is much more, just has that sort of larger than life but deeper humanity feel to him that really doesn't come across in the film, because he's being a very dark, sort of gritty, grim type of figure in sorts, that it is much more raw, and just something about it just doesn't open up to the possibilities that the character should have at this point in time. Probably does sort of fit with how he was with the Nick Stahl performance, where he was kind of a burnout and kind of just everything that character was portrayed as in that film kind of probably does sort of translate to this to a certain extent, but it just, again, doesn't correct the pathway of the character from what it was from the inception from Cameron's interpretations of John Connor to what it became in 2-3, that it really just doesn't go off on the right direction to really make it a very inspiring character. It just seems like Christian Bale not being able to push the material forward, or anyone motivating him to really kind of elevate it himself. So it's just a performance that doesn't really function to the extent that you'd want it to, that it really wouldn't be the type of character that you want to see lead it. That, again, everything is just at this sort of flat, mediocre level with everything in the film. Nothing just gets pushed beyond where it could be. There's nothing challenge for it. There's nothing challenging Christian Bale in this film at all. He's done terrific roles that just challenge them on such physical and psychological levels that this is just a very mediocre performance from him, which is a sad thing to say, but it's just the fact of the matter in terms of my opinion. And indeed, we do get a younger Kyle Reese in this film, portrayed by Anton Yelchin, who is an okay actor. Just like, I never really have yet to see anything that I really liked him that much in, and again, something just doesn't click for me. I don't think he was that great of a performance in the film. That I know that he did a lot of studying of Michael Biehn's performance, did a lot of work to try to mimic and try to forge his performance as close as possible to Michael Biehn's, but just like one of those things where it kind of feels just like the silly kid brother in this film, that he's trying to, alongside the Marcus Wright character, trying to act like he's this bigger, badder type of guy than he is, but he just comes off as a little lame and a little bit, not the character you'd want to see. I mean, obviously younger, less experienced, but just like you expect this to be a character that's more mature. That if you're someone who's growing up in this post-apocalyptic Judgment Day wasteland and everything, you'd think people would be more hardened, they'd mature more, there'd be something more, there'd just be more under the surface of this character at this point in time, instead of just kind of like running around with this kind of little kid or whatnot through Los Angeles all on their own, and just like when they encounter Marcus Wright, it just doesn't seem like a very experienced type of thing. It's just like this kid running around playing dress up in the Resistance sort of gear and everything, and just like it doesn't quite feel like the Kyle Reese that you'd want to see. Obviously, again, it's an altered timeline, supposedly, but you still have to appease what the fans want to see from these characters. You have to show them the character that they're familiar with. You have to show something that is that familiar, instead of just having them repeat catchphrases from the rest of the franchise, or doing little fan service types of things, which is seeing this film is full of fan service on like him wearing like the Nike sneakers, or various other things like the CGI Arnold Terminator showing up in the third act or whatnot. Just like there are various little things in this film that are not too overt, but they're still there, and there's a lot of fan service in a type of way to just kind of like appease everything that has been talked about or has been referenced, or this type of stuff that just comes across as very kind of like quickly get this stuff in and out of the film just to throw it out there, instead of really kind of focusing on trying to build up a much more cohesive, coherent, and substantive story. Let's focus on all these little things that don't really matter all that much, and just try to make a little fun kitsch out of it here and there. But I mean, it's just kind of difficult for me to take Yelchin's performance that seriously when he just comes off a little bit kind of like silly and lame and whatnot. It just doesn't feel like a strong character that's going to grow up into the Kyle Reese that we're familiar with. That just like, there's a lot of things, there's a lot of problems with this film that are just, again, the same problems you'd have with a prequel and a sequel, because this is both, that it's showing the events that have led up to this point from the linear timeline from T1 through T3, but also showing what happens to Kyle Reese and John Connor older and everything that happened before the events of T1. So there's all these problems that the film encounters, that is trying to do so many different things that ultimately doesn't make it resemble what you saw before, but also trying to freshen up the whole thing. So it's like, it's trying to do all these different things while trying to appease fans, but it just doesn't feel compatible in my view. And some of the other supporting cast I really do like in this film, such as seeing Michael Ironside show up as one of the Resistance generals, and him and Bale had worked before in The Machinist, and I think Michael Ironside just adds something extra to the film, showing up in another Arnold franchise of sorts after Total Recall. And I like Common a lot. I just like, he's a rapper turned actor, but it's like, I've always liked what I've seen from him in films in these little supporting roles. Just like the guy has a certain amount of depth that he brings to characters, a little bit of emotional quality. Just get a good vibe off of him every time I see him in something. Just like, I like to see him in more stuff. And I really like Moon Bloodgood's character of Blair Williams, that she forms that bond with the character of Marcus Wright. And I like the whole beat in the film that after she sort of seemingly betrays everyone to kind of allow Marcus to escape and everything, you have that little scene between her and John Connor, and she says, "I didn't see a machine, I saw a man," which obviously clicks in John Connor's head that he's been there before with the events of Terminator 2, that he didn't see a machine by the end of the film. He saw a human soul in there or something. So there's that nice little sort of corollary, that sort of beat that really kind of rings true for the character, really resonates very strongly. And it's these nice little touches in the screenplay and the film overall that really kind of adds a little something more to it that kind of goes against some of the other stuff that I've levied against it, saying that there are some things that are just not all that good with the fan service that the film gave. But when you really have those things that kind of harken back to the character development of these people, really kind of fleshes things out and really kind of gives a bit more of a circular type of feel to the whole events of the whole franchise. And I do feel the film does have a lot of good cinematography. I mean, even though it is completely different from the future war sequences that we've seen before, which have been really damn riveting and really freaking awesome too, all the nighttime war stuff with the lasers and all this type of stuff. This film just feels a lot more rudimentary, a little bit more down to earth in a certain way, that it all is just completely reversed on itself, that there's no lasers, it all takes place during daytime instead of nighttime. And it's all this very washed out type of look and everything that made the film look as gritty as it possibly can be, which does have its appeal. But despite any of that, I think the cinematography really allows the film to deliver on some very good action sequences with a lot of bombast, bang for your buck type of stuff. Shows off McG's slick way of putting together action, that everything really does have a lot of cinematic and dynamic stuff going on with the camera work and all the action sequences. Even if some of it might have a little bit of shaky camera work here and there, it is all still very well edited, very well paced. Even if some of the stuff might seem a little long-winded at points in time, it still delivers a lot of visceral action. You got a lot of practical stunts, very big practical explosions. I think adds a lot to the scope of the film overall that I thought T3 really kind of lacked in a certain way. The action just really kind of seems like a high budget type of film, that you see the money on the screen with how McG delivers the action in this film, between the cinematography, how everything's paced out, just everything that is brought in with the effects of the film just adds so much to the intensity, the excitement that you can have in some of the action sequences, even if they are kind of drag out a little bit too long. Even the climax of the film really delivers something that is a little bit suspenseful, a little bit tension filled, even if it does kind of copy off of T1 and T2 with the industrial setting and the molten steel being poured on the Terminator and the getting kind of frozen and whatnot and breaking out of it. Still executed very well. There's still, because the cinematography is so moody and atmospheric and kind of gritty too, that just brings a little bit of visual vibrance and whatnot, a little bit of visual intensity to the film, kind of amps up things, kind of gives you a little bit something more to get your blood pumping a little bit. Even if it is a little derivative, it still kind of delivers something that is satisfying on a certain level. And I think just overall that the film just has a very good look to it, just really kind of adds something and just kind of makes itself look like a very strong visual piece and everything. And I think the film has some very good high-end quality CGI. It's like the CGI in this film is absolutely incredible. But it just seems like it's kind of trying to cash in a little bit with all the big monstrous robots, all the different types of Terminators and everything with the motorbikes and all this type of stuff, trying to cash in a little bit on that Transformers satiation that's going on at the time. Big monstrous robots, let's go watch this, it'll be kind of like Transformers. So it's like it's trying to kind of write off that wave a little bit, that it, again, there's stuff that's slightly familiar, but so much of the stuff is so unfamiliar that it doesn't really kind of resemble a Terminator film that much. That there's just so many things in this film that's like they've got good ideas and they just go off in a different direction, or they don't take them far enough to really develop and flesh them out to make them coherent. It makes sense in the whole thing. That again is a problem, that they're starting up with one film and they want to make it a new trilogy of films. So we're like, oh, we'll explain it like 2 films down the line. Well, the film doesn't do that good, then you're left with a film that isn't very good. And that's kind of the problem. That's kind of a problem with a lot of franchises these days, that people want to, studios want to launch a film and make it a trilogy or make a whole franchise. So we're going to kind of just lay some seeds in the first film that are probably going to be carried up and picked up later on in other films that we don't know are actually going to end up getting made, because we don't know if this one's going to be successful, but we're going to do it anyway. A lot of times it ends up being a much weaker film for that. That when James Cameron made the first film, it was just like, that's it, that's the first film. I made it as a single film. He didn't set it up to be like, I'm going to intend to make a second film. He made the film as most self-contained as he possibly could to make it a strong story that stands up on its own merits. And even did that with Terminator 2. That Terminator 2 sets up and develops and resolves all its plot lines in a very strong, substantive way. It doesn't leave things dangling out in the wind at the end of the film to be tied up maybe at a later point in time, if possibly you make another film down the line. It doesn't quite add up in that type of way, and that's a problem with a lot of franchises and stuff like that these days, that just don't focus on making the strongest film possible standalone, and then if you make sequels, make those just as well as the first film, instead of just like trying to weave threads and trying to string people along from one film to the next before you actually give them a satisfying conclusion. And it's one of those things that Terminator Salvation is one of those films that I kind of like for its potential. I think it is an interesting film to look at, that it does, like I said, doesn't look too much like a Terminator film, but it would probably go right with a kind of like a Road Warrior Transformers type of hybrid style movie, you know? If you go in with that idea, you might kind of enjoy it on that level. But again, it's just, you watch the film, it's like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, doesn't resolve its main plot issues, and the script just has a lot of holes in it, and just like, overall, I think it's a better film than T3 that at least takes its material seriously. It's not joking and diminishing and degrading the quality of its characters or its storyline. It's taking everything in a very honest and earnest type of direction and everything, but it just, creatively, is not the most solid film that you could possibly make. It is not the type of film that's going to launch the franchise into a brand new direction, because obviously, again, costs more, made less. Cost about $200 million to produce, and ultimately only brought back $371 million at the box office, which was not terribly to anyone's liking, because usually you want to make about double your money back from the budget that you spent to really make it a solid success, considering how much money you have to kick back to the theater owners and everything. So it's one of those things that the film just didn't strike the right chord, because yeah, you got Christian Bale there, but it just like wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for the franchise to really kind of grab people, and again, it wasn't extremely well received, probably very mediocre reviews at best, but it's not a film that was rushed. They took time, but they did a lot of rewrites, had a lot of screenwriters involved, trying to get the script to a point where they could actually go into production and make things, and whatever the case, they churned this out, and whatever you think about it, it exists. And apparently there was a different ending to this film that was originally scripted until it kind of leaked out on the internet, and the filmmakers scrambled to rewrite it. And that was that John Connor was actually going to die at the end of the film, and Marcus Wright was going to take on the persona of John Connor, so that the John Connor we ended up knowing would all along be a cyborg. And yeah, a lot of people would have been raised up in arms wanting to lynch the freaking screen for that, you know. I don't think that would have sat well with anyone, as like, but the ending that we get really has that sort of sacrifice for Marcus, which obviously would have been a much more stronger type of thing if the whole film just kind of amplified his character and we had a better actor in the role to really kind of bring out a much more deeper emotional connection with him. But it does have a fine ending that kind of just says we're closing the chapter that we've gotten to a certain point with trying to knock down Skynet, but there's still a larger battle ahead of us. So it's a nice ending. It works all right, but obviously there's just so many loose plot threads in the film that just don't get tied up and just like leaves it dangling out in the wind. That just like, it just leaves you a little bit unsatisfied. That there's a certain qualities of the film, like I said, that are good. They're intriguing. They kind of get you to a certain point. There's certain good action sequences, but there's just that roadblock in the way of this film that the direction just isn't strong enough to really kind of pull what you need to out of the characters and the actors and whatnot, or really kind of tie up the plot threads to really kind of solidify the film as its own strong entity on its own. But I still think it's a film that is worth watching if you have not seen it, that it does have admirable qualities to it that really kind of, you might enjoy it. You might enjoy it. I don't know. Some people definitely don't enjoy it at all. There's a lot of mixed feelings about everything in this franchise after T2, that a lot of people, or some people think one thing is the worst and other people think another one's the worst. So what are your thoughts about Terminator Salvation? I would definitely like to hear what they are. If you enjoyed the film, if you feel it's a little bit of a mixed bag, what do you dislike and like about the film? Are there pros and cons about it that kind of balance things out, or still feels unbalanced to you? So it's a interesting film that they tried something different, tried to freshen things up, but it just really just didn't quite come together in the right package. But it's still a film that I would have liked to have seen an extension to, see a follow-up, kind of trying to carry these characters and plot threads onto something else, because at least it's interesting. It really brings something that's interesting to the table that I would be intrigued to see it followed up and try to tie up the loose ends and try to make a stronger picture follow-up to it. So that's my feelings, and obviously that's not what we were going to get. So another thing stops in dead tracks and everything, and go off in another direction to do yet another film, and let's see where the franchise goes on from here on out. But Post your comments below, what you thought about Terminator Salvation, and basically your general feelings about the franchise overall at this point. Where do you think it might go from here on out, and if you like the direction that things are possibly going from here on out, or just which sequel would you like to have seen taken a different direction. So a lot of things to discuss with this franchise, and kind of glad everything is now finished, all done with the whole film franchise and everything. And just post your comments. Your thumbs up is extremely well appreciated. If you enjoyed what you saw here in this entire series covering the Terminator franchise, definitely enjoy that. If you share the links around, there will be a special playlist put together for all these Terminator reviews. You can share that around as well. And just check everything out, and I enjoy you guys checking things out here. And going to stop being long-winded and cut things off. I'll be back in due time with a little bit of change of pace. We'll see what happens, but we got Mission Impossible Rogue Nation coming up at the end of the month, so try to touch on a couple Tom Cruise films, so we'll see what happens in due time. Hope you guys enjoy things, and thanks for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.